So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and I'm joined by Andy. Andy, you and I are old colleagues, I suppose, from when I used to live in Sweden, and you're also someone who now lives in Sweden or still lives in Sweden. If you'd like to give us a bit of an introduction to who you are, where you're from, and where you've lived.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, James. My name is Andy, and I originally grew up in Scotland, in a small town called Bo'ness, actually, just outside of Edinburgh, and basically was living there and met a Swedish girl called Anna, and then followed my heart and moved over to Sweden. Call myself a love refugee, almost, over to Sweden. And I was originally working in the music industry before, working as a musician and performing, which took me to really great places and done loads of great shows around Europe and whatnot. But now I decided to take the leap of faith 6 years ago now and moved to Gothenburg, Sweden, and be with Anna there. And we're actually getting married just in a couple of weeks as well. So I guess I'm stuck there now. But I'm working now for Polestar and really working with everything you can think of with electric cars, as you know, as we work together, James. And exciting times. And I think I've really spearheaded myself into the corporate world in Sweden, and it's quite some place to do it, especially in a town like Gothenburg with so much heritage in the car industry. So it's that's a quick rundown of how I ended up in Gothenburg, really. But it was, if you want a little bit longer story to it, it was quite a journey to get there. I was in the music industry. I had contracts that I had to finish off, so I planned to move. Then it took me a year further to move. So I actually got a job at Sky TV for that year to gain some more money and prepare myself for the move to Sweden. I was obviously coming back and forth from a long distance relationship, so every time I would go over, I took clothes, belongings, my bike, everything bit by bit, every flight when I took it over, which actually was quite a good top tip, I think. If you do visit where you're going to move, take stuff every time, because then it makes it easier when you do make the final move. And then now I've been living in Sweden for 6 years. I have a Swedish passport now as well, so I could never think back then 6 years ago that I'd be where I am now. So I think if people were thinking to move or to make the jump to a new country, do it, because it really opens up so many doors and avenues that you don't expect to happen when you go to a new country. So,
well, that's a great introduction. I'm sure we'll unpack that a bit further into the hows and whys as we go through it. So welcome to section 1 of the podcast, or getting there. So Andy, this is essentially a rundown of everything you need to do from deciding you're moving abroad, getting all the plans in place, and then I guess getting on that last plane in that case, or first plane over, or drive, or however you manage to get home. So I guess let's go back to the start. So before you met Anna, then, did you have any dreams or visions of living abroad or moving abroad, or was the UK your home and then just obviously touring a lot for your previous job?
Yeah, I mean, you always go, we visited loads of places when we were touring around, and of course you visit cities and you think, oh, I could live here, when you go to a really nice city or town, and you feel like this would be a great place to live. And I still do that today, even though I have moved to a new country. But sometimes you visit a new city and you always think this would be a nice place to live. But no, to answer the question fully, I would say I never ever thought I'd see myself moving to Sweden until I met Anna and the way it all worked out, really. So it's amazing the way that life's journey takes you sometimes. So
obviously you met Anna and then you decided, yes, I want to live in Sweden and see where that relationship kind of goes, and now it's going to be legally binding. Sorry. When you decided to take that move, then what was the kind of first thing you needed to do? What was your kind of, you go, yes, I'm moving, then what?
Yeah, I mean, it was, like we kind of discussed before, it wasn't easy. It was a long-distance relationship, which is never easy for anyone, and a lot of visits back and forth. And then it kind of built up to, okay, maybe I should take the leap and just move here. Okay, I was working self-employed as a musician, so went and spoke to my accountant and said, so what do I need to do? How do I close things down? How do I let HMRC know that I'm not going to be here and pay tax, and how do I move? So actually, he helped me a lot to get everything sorted for the last year of working in the UK. Basically started already for like a year looking for work and looking for jobs in Sweden, and I already had an apartment, so that was kind of an easy part, because I think, as anybody might know, it's very difficult moving to a new city and trying to find a place to live, especially in Gothenburg, as you maybe experienced, James. It's not the easiest to find apartments.
Yeah, now they're getting those first-time contracts.
Yes. So luckily, Anna had a first-time contract, and we have another place now that we've upgraded to. But so that helped me a lot. And then obviously the paperwork and getting into the Swedish system, and that's very difficult if you don't have a job lined up first of all, which I didn't when I first moved, actually. So getting your personal number, it's called in Swedish, and your taxation number. To get all those details, you need to get into the Swedish system, and you need to get a bank account. You can't get one until you have that number. So that was very difficult, I would say. Some hard couple of months until I actually had a job contract in hand and was able to go back to the Skatteverket, the tax agency in Sweden, and say, okay, we got a contract, got the signature, everything was there. Then things started to move, and you got the tax number and everything. But it was really funny, and I don't know if you had this experience when you moved to Sweden, but you can't set up a bank account until you have that number, like I said. But then you can't actually, the bank account I set up, and it might be different with other banks, but you had to pay for a national ID to get the Swedish bank account, and you could only pay for your national ID online. And I didn't have a Swedish bank account to pay for it, but luckily I still had my British bank account, so I could pay for it. But I just always thought to myself, what if this was someone who didn't have another bank account or didn't have another means of paying? So sometimes you consider yourself lucky from where you come from and the background that you have, but it would be very difficult if you didn't have another way to pay for that way to get your ID card and then go get the bank account set up. So yeah, I look back at those couple of months now, because it took a few months before you get all the paperwork through and you get the bank account set up, and everybody uses Swish and Bank ID and everything in Sweden, so everything's all digital on your phone. So if you don't have any of those things, you really don't feel part of society in any way almost. So it's kind of it's a funny situation, but that was a hard few months to get everything into the paperwork and get set up. But as soon as you get in there, then you feel part. I mean, it's a very rewarding feeling to, okay, now I've got this now. I might be able to make something work here in Sweden. So, and Sweden has a great system, actually. As soon as you're in there, it's a very good system to be in. And then it turned out to, not very long after that, because I'm working in the automotive industry, I started to look at things like, okay, my driver's license, I need to swap my UK driver's license over to a Swedish driver's license. So that was also a very funny thing to get to start letting go of your British ID cards and stuff, because you have to swap it over. You don't get to keep your British one, so then you swap it over. And then that all kind of starts building up, because then you've been there for a few years, you're working, you're got all the system, and then you start thinking about, oh, maybe I should apply for citizenship. And it goes without saying, since we're both from the UK, James, that obviously Brexit made people think differently when they start moving to different countries. And actually made me, because I was obviously on a European passport, and then Brexit happened, and then you're not anymore. So then that was very eye-opening, because everything was pretty, even though it was difficult to get into the system at the time and get all the job contracts signed up and everything, but I think it was a lot easier for me than it was for people without a European passport. And then as soon as Brexit happened, I had to go to the migrations office, and then I had to get another ID card because I wasn't European anymore. So that was actually quite, I think scary sounds like such a strong word, but it was quite like, oh, this is different now. I've been here for 3 years. Now I have to go and do this. So then I started looking at citizenship. And because I've been living with Anna and I was together with a Swedish person, then it was, you need to live in Sweden for 5 years, but you can apply sooner if you're with a Swedish partner.
It's Sambo, right?
Yeah, so it's like this Swedish Sambo, right? So actually happened just after COVID. So, I mean, we look back at the timeline, you have Brexit and you have COVID. It's been probably one of the hardest times ever to emigrate to new countries. So it's not easy. I remember I had driven my car from Gothenburg back to Edinburgh to prove that long-distance EV travel is possible, just so people know that. Took my car back because I still had a few belongings here or there, and if I bring the car, then I can bring everything in the car, because I didn't have much. I'd taken most things over. And then that was during kind of when COVID started lifting and people could travel again. And then I took the Eurotunnel and everything was great. I had a good Christmas and saw family after not seeing them for a few years. And then France decided to close the borders to British passport holders. And I had the Eurotunnel booked to drive back. had to change all my plans. Luckily, the Netherlands still allowed British people in, so I took a ferry from Newcastle to Amsterdam instead, and then drove back to Sweden that way. And then it was literally the day after, and this was like the 2nd of January, so basically right at the beginning of the year. I was like, okay, I'm applying for my Swedish citizenship. Yep, yeah, I drove back on New Year's Eve. So I'll never forget that New Year's Eve. It was a long drive, and it was quite exciting to drive through Denmark when all the fireworks were going off at midday. But yeah, so that was a kind of rush to get back because of COVID things. And then I decided to apply to my Swedish citizenship. And that took almost over a year. And it takes even longer for some other people. So I still consider myself lucky there as well that I managed to hear after a year or so and got a Swedish passport. And luckily, you can keep your British passport as well. So you can have British and Swedish citizenship at the same time. So now European again, I have a Swedish passport and I have a British passport. And that's something that moving to a new country and trying to, build yourself up into the society and live there, you never think you're going to get... I mean, it's still to this day, I think it's weird when I have my Swedish passport because it says nationality Swedish, but you're still British at heart, so it's that very...
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you're right. It's very interesting thinking about all the stuff you just said, and because I moved after Brexit, after COVID. I worked at the same company, and they made it happen in that sense of, because I worked for a Swedish company, it made getting the visa application much easier. It still took a lot of time.
Yeah.
Much longer than I thought, and I happened to move during the summer break. So I didn't actually know my visa got approved until 2 weeks after and I got back from the summer holiday, that my visa got approved and my flight was booked like 4 days after. So I was a bit nervous not knowing when my visa would come through, so if I could fly in or not. But I was lucky it did. But yeah, you're right. In terms of Brexit, we made it just absolute mess of it all, really, and meant that my visa was only 1 year.
I mean, because I didn't need a visa when I went over at first because we were European. We had a European passport, European Union passport. And then when Brexit happened and I had to go to the migrations office and apply for another ID card, and it was because then you're not your European Union anymore. So it was very that was very strange because at very nerving times because no one really knew what was happening because it never happened before. The rules were just kind of you read something and then it changed every now and then, and so it was kind of...
Yeah, I think I had that when I visited Sweden during COVID. It was 2021, I think. It was like summer 2021, and it was, you needed a letter. So Brexit had happened at that point because it happened at the start of 2021, I think, officially anyway. And we needed a letter to be invited into Sweden in order to conduct work. But I didn't need a visa because it was only a short work trip, but it was 2 weeks. But when I got to the border force at Landvetter Airport in Gothenburg, the lady or the person at the customs or passport control was saying to me, you can't be here for work because you've not got a visa. I said, well, no, I can't be a tourist because I'm not allowed to travel during COVID unless it's for work. I've got a letter saying I'm allowed to be in the country from my employer inviting me in for a short-term contract, for a short-term visit. She's like, no, you can't be here. You haven't got a work permit. It's because of Brexit. I said, no, I don't need one. It's only 2 weeks. And then I had to wait for like half an hour for the police to come. Like, yeah, it's fine. Like, let them through. This is like 11:30 on a Sunday night, so there's nothing open. And all when I get there and starving and didn't know where I was going, I was wearing a mask and no one else was, and all this stuff.
You look back at those now, crazy how hard it was to do anything.
Going back to before you moved, then, in terms of, did you have a house? Were you living at your parents and stuff? Did you have to give up loads of things before you moved?
Not too much. I mean, I didn't own a house, so I was renting, and then it was easy to get everything together because I was working as a musician, so mainly I started to sell a lot of my equipment that I had actually, and fund the move, as to say. And as anyone who's a musician might know, I didn't get rid of all my instruments, but I got rid of a lot of the hardware and speakers. But that's still kind of something that's close to you as a musician because you've built all this gear up over time, So, and I remember selling a bass amp that I had, an Ashdown, really tall cab, and I had this like custom-made case for the amp head and everything, and I loved it so much. And then I remember selling it to a guy in Glasgow, and it sounds really sad, but I was quite sad when I was driving away after selling it. Like, you look back at all those things and you don't think about it, but you were doing that to move, basically, so you didn't have so many belongings.
And did you not think of trying to be a musician in Sweden? Was that not an avenue you could possibly try and think about? You said obviously you looked for work when you got there. Did you not continue that same career? but from a different home base?
I was working for a music agency, and I did ask if they had any work, because it was like a pool of musicians that you worked in, but they didn't operate in Sweden. So then I started looking for things similar, of course. And I don't know if this is too early to touch on it now, but when I jumped into Sweden, Swedish lifestyle, I actually, there's great Facebook groups and things where you can meet other like-minded musicians, and I think music is an international language, which is something great to have if you move to another country. I think you should really touch on it, because that's the first time when I moved to Sweden, I posted up saying, oh, I'm a musician, I can play this instrument, that instrument, and if anyone's looking for a new band member or whatnot. And I managed to join a band after just being in Sweden just for a couple of weeks, actually. And that was like the first friends I made, and I still speak to some of those guys now. We don't actually, we met up and we were just, we didn't perform or anything. We just met up and jammed out and had some rehearsals and stuff together. But that was like for the first year or so when I lived in Sweden. So that was really nice, because then it felt like I didn't say goodbye totally to the music world. I still did that, but it was, and it's, like I said, they were playing similar music and songs to what I played in the UK or other places. So it was, you can really connect to people through music. And I think that was one of the easiest ways to make friends. But now, the job that I'm in now, I don't have so much time to do music. And it's kind of questioning myself now, saying that I should probably think about it more myself and get back into it. Because it's not only good for making friends and making music together, but also for yourself. It's mentally rewarding, and it's a good way to get away from the stresses of life, musics.
Completely, yeah. I guess it's probably a good homesickness remedy for you, I guess, is to play songs which you used to play back home as an escape, if you have the time and stuff and things like that. Well, is there anything else you wanted to discuss before going into the next section about being there, which I think is going to be most of the meat of the podcast from your point of view?
I mentioned earlier that I got a job at Sky TV, working in, they have a big office in Scotland. And I'm a person who's very loyal when I've had jobs. I've been at Polestar now for just over 5 years. And when I was working in a music agency and stuff as well, that was up to 7, 8 years. But when I got the job at Sky, I knew that after September, because I started working there in September, and then I moved in 2018. Must have been 2017, 2016. And I knew that I was only going to work there for a year. And I felt quite guilty in a way, and because I'm, like I said, quite a loyal person, and obviously loads of people jump into a job to make money and to do things, so you shouldn't feel guilty. And I did work hard there, and put overtime in and stuff as well. I didn't, and the colleagues I worked with, they were great. But I just always knew that when it came to September 2017, I was going to leave, because then I had a gap in my schedule for music stuff, because I was slowing down the music bookings and trying to finish that off. And then I had a couple of months actually where I left Sky, and then I moved to Sweden and started looking for work for a couple of months there. But then I had to come back for the full month of December, because I had a full month of gigs and stuff booked in December. So then I had to come back and basically finish all that off, which is also quite strange, because then I just finished off a job and left the job, tried to live in Sweden for a couple of months and try different jobs here or there, or apply to different jobs. Come back to Scotland for a month, play all the gigs, have Christmas, and then basically the Boxing Day after Christmas, I took a flight, and then that was the day I would literally move to Sweden. So properly one-way ticket, On
your last day living in the UK, I suppose.
And it was Christmas Day, so I guess that was quite nice.
Well, it's Christmas Day in the UK, it's not Christmas Day in Sweden.
Well, that's true, but I've never actually thought about that when you said that's the last day living in the UK was Christmas Day. I never thought about that since I've moved, so that's quite nice to say it, put it that way.
Wonderful. What a great way of ending the first section, and then we can go into section 2. So welcome back to the podcast, welcome to section 2, which is all about being there. So Andy, this is where I kind of talk to my guests about their initial impressions. Obviously, you'd kind of been climatized to Swedish lifestyle, obviously dating a Swede, and probably asking questions here or there as you've been dating and things. So you kind of knew more than most before moving, and obviously with your time going back and forth. But still, it's a culture shock when you get there, and it's new and it's different, and if you're looking for jobs and things. So talk us through that in terms of when you first arrived to actually live there on Boxing Day. What was it like? It was cold and dark, I assume, and probably raining or snowing. How did that help or hinder you?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it in the last section because to me, it was Boxing Day, but to them, they say celebrate Christmas on the 24th. Christmas Day is a different sort of celebration for them. It's different to how we do it in the UK. So yeah, normally in the UK, Boxing Day, you have your traditions that you do with all your families, or you go shopping, and they don't have that in, well, they do have Boxing Day sales and stuff as well in Sweden, but like, when I met Anna's family and everything, we didn't do that way. So it was kind of, that was like, this is different to celebrate Boxing Day this way. But like you said, I had been lucky in the sense that I got to really be immersed in the Swedish lifestyle quite early with my visits back and forth, because obviously you go to Anna's parents' house and they have your postcard picture house. It's a red wooden house next to a lake in the forest. I mean, you couldn't make it up really. It is picture postcard stuff. That was one thing that kind of makes you want to move, because Sweden is so quiet where they live. The trees, the air, just everything seemed really good in that sense. But it's also, we live in Gothenburg, so they live obviously out in the countryside, and as parents, and the proper nice Swedish lifestyle. And that's kind of what I strive for now, that I would really like to live out in the countryside in Sweden and have that type of life. But living in the city, Gothenburg, I would say, is a very nice city to move to if you don't want to be, I've been in London a lot, worked there, and I'm currently in Madrid right now with work. And Madrid is an amazing city, but my gosh, it's so huge and busy with people and traffic. And you could imagine moving to some big cities, and some people love the hustle and bustle and the fast pace of life, but it's actually, I think I prefer Gothenburg in a slower paced city. And so I think Gothenburg was quite a nice place to move to, because it's not so overwhelming to begin with. But the Swedish culture is very different, and culture is obviously the biggest aspect of moving anywhere, but the working cultures, I mean, everyone's very, very hard workers, but you have loads of different workers' rights in Sweden, and summer vacation is like legal depending on like where you work, but basically the government says that you must take 4 weeks off during these, and most people have the full 4 weeks off. And in the UK, I mean, I'm not saying you don't get good holidays in the UK, but you're not like legally bound to take a full 4 weeks off in a row as an industry holiday. And I know some other countries in Europe do the same sort of thing as Sweden. And actually, I still find that strange now. I mean, I was looking at summer weeks off this year, and it's strange being able to take, it just reminds me of being at school when you used to get your summer days. So.
It did feel like that, because I moved during that time, and no one was here, and
yeah, no one's
Addy was there to help me. That was about it. Addy and Victor.
You've seen it firsthand. It's but I think that's something that you must look at. Swedish people, that they do things correct here, and they're very, very, very structured in that sense, and they do look out for their health. So physical and mental health. I mean, that's why they have these certain vacation times throughout the year in the summer, and they have other sports holidays throughout the year for school kids, and obviously parents take those times off as well to go skiing and to do sports and activities. So it's like, that's something I think is lost in the UK, where you need to think about your health and your mental health, and everything, because we all work so hard that you forget to take time off and to do things correctly. And I think that's something that that's really changed my perspective and the way of working with being in Sweden. And also another cultural thing I would say, if I can touch on other things outside of work as well, because I don't want to do.
Of course you can.
Yeah. I think the joke about when it was COVID time in Sweden, and basically everywhere else had the 2 meter rules. You had to stand 2 meters apart, and in Sweden that's just normal, that people don't really stand next to each other. They don't sit next to each other in the bus, which is kind of like a stereotypical joke in Sweden. But then in COVID times, it was like, we have to stand 2 meters apart. That's quite close. Normally it's fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like public transport, taking the bus and doing things. I think another thing that was really nice in Sweden is everything's so digital. So you have your bank ID, you have your Swish on your phone to exchange money to friends, and can't tell you what Swedish cash looks like because no one uses cash.
I actually have some.
Do you have some? Maybe you can show me that. I don't know what it looks like.
It's in my car actually.
Yeah.
But it's funny when you mentioned about your bank situation in the first part of the podcast.
Yeah.
Because I also did have a bank when I moved, and I had to I got a haircut, and the guy only said with Swish or cash.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've got a Monzo card, which I was paying for most of my stuff with, because I had no foreign transaction fees, and then I could get paid and stuff. Because I was just getting paid by the Swedish bank, by Swedish business into my UK bank account.
Yeah.
But I had to then go withdraw some Swedish cash cash to pay for my haircut. Which is that, and I still got the change. I'm like, can't possibly use it. The only place I can think of is Lisbon, which is where you might be able to get rid of cash.
Go and play the pop-up wheel and stuff.
Yeah, and like quarters or coins or set coins for playing the game where you can win a massive bar of shekels or something.
I was so disappointed. I won a big Toblerone at the Lisbon once, and I thought it would be like massive triangles of chocolate, but it's just full of small ones. So it's a con.
It's false advertising.
No, but I mean, it's a very advanced country. Sweden is very modern, and I don't think people realise if they do that. And I think also the funny thing for me, especially coming from Scotland, where we have a lot of lochs everywhere, as we call it in Scotland. But in Sweden, they have so many lakes. Gothenburg is by the sea. You have loads of archipelago islands. And the summertime in Sweden is actually beautiful. It's very warm, which you would never think of in Sweden. You just think cold, dark, snow. But the summers are amazing. You can go swimming like all the time. And I always have this image of like just going to the lake and going swimming and having all the trees and just, it's a very outdoors country. And I think that really is something that I enjoy about Sweden as well. So.
Yeah, I think when I first went, I went to Delhun, which is just outside Gothenburg. I also went to the archipelagos, and a weekend I had there because I was told to go, and you can pay for the tram. You can get all the way there for no extra money. So I spent time in Styrso or something, which is one of the South Islands in the archipelago, and it was incredible. Like, I took my drone, I had loads of fun with it because there's nothing else to do. I was by myself, just traveling around, and it was incredible because you're right that. Because the days are so long, you have so much time to explore and kind of be outside and see things and look for things, which is really quite incredible. And I think Gothenburg's wonderful for that. You have Slottsskogen, which is in the city, but it's this massive forest, effectively. So.
Yeah, and it's beautiful there. And I think you just triggered me to remember something, and it's quite funny because I went to the same island that you were talking about and stuff, and we took our bikes there. And I think that's so beautiful in Sweden that you have so many cycle lanes. It's so safe to cycle. I mean, all the way to work, or you have basically roads for the bikes everywhere, and you're never on the road next to cars. You're on a separate part away from the cars, so you feel so safe to cycle. And I actually took my bike from Scotland over to Sweden, wrapped it up and put it on the plane in the oversized cargo, and it arrived safely actually. Put the wheels back on, and I've never cycled my bike so much since I'd been in Gothenburg. So much so that I actually had to get rid of that bike because I'd been using it so much, and it was a very old bike. I'd had it all my life, which was actually one of my biggest milestones of living in Sweden. Was like when I finally got like first paycheck in from work, and I went and bought myself a new bike because I was like that cycle to work, and it was such a nice feeling to just go get a new bike and cycle because you cycle so much. And I've really got into it more in cycling, and we just like you said, we'd take the bike and go on the ferry and go to the archipelago islands. You can basically get of it. It's so nice. But that to me is like something, when you move to a new country, you want that memory, that rewarding memory, and it was buying a new bicycle.
Yeah, it's a great first milestone for sure. And going back to, you mentioned people about work, and when you arrived then, you said you'd been applying for jobs, you've been looking for stuff. How did you find work? Was it through LinkedIn, job sites, agencies? How were you trying to find work? And I guess you didn't speak Swedish at the time, so did that hinder you, or did that help, or what were your kind of steps in order to get a job?
Yeah, no, it was very difficult, and it is Swedes are so good at English. I mean, you and I both grew up in the UK, and I actually think most Swedish people have better English than we do. They learn it in a different.
Yeah, but I'm from Liverpool and you're from Scotland, so it's not really much lighter.
Yeah, we're probably not the best example of and we coming from where we come, we pick up bad habits and bad slang. I would say dialect from where we come from. So Swedes are so bloody good at English that it's difficult to learn the language, because if you go somewhere and you really immerse yourself and learn the language, then you need to talk it if there's not much English speakers. It did take me quite a long time to learn Swedish, and I mean I'm at a level now where I think I'm better and I can speak to colleagues at work and take meetings at work in Swedish, but I'm still nowhere near as good as a native Swedish speaker, the way that they are to switch between bilingual English and Swedish. But so yeah, it was definitely a struggle in the beginning, not speaking English. But luckily I found a job that I did for the first few parts of being in Sweden, which the owner of that company was Australian, and he spoke English. He couldn't learn much Swedish. So I was that was handy because I found a company that was run by someone speaking English, so that helped me. But we were dealing with a lot of Swedish customers and having to speak Swedish, and that helped me to learn Swedish a bit faster. But then people would normally just swap to English anyway, and we'd start speaking English. But then when I got the job at Polestar, actually, and this is quite it's quite funny the way you asked this. It's almost like you rehearsed it, James. But I promise to everyone listening, we did rehearse this. But I applied to a job at Polestar where we were traveling around launching Polestar 2, and they were looking for a mixture of different native speakers because we were traveling around Europe. So they were looking for, obviously, English speakers, for German speaker. We had Swedish speakers as well because Swedish people were on the team as well. We had Spanish speakers, and it was like I actually ended up getting the job where I needed English because I was a native English speaker. So, and then I started that job, and that was kind of the strange part of my story, is that I'd only just kind of been in Sweden for just about a year, and then obviously just done long distance for over a year. It was super nice to be living together, and then being in Sweden for a year. Then I ended up going traveling for 6 to 8 months for work. So then I was never back in Sweden I was only back like every now and then. So, which was an amazing experience because I got to go and see some great places around Europe and travel around some cities that I'd never been to before and meet all the different cultures in different cities. It's very, very nice to hear the different types of questions that people ask about a car in different countries and what they're focusing on. So I learned so much going on that tour, and then luckily I got kept on at Polestar afterwards, and I've been there over 5 years now. But it's that was kind of difficult actually when I look back at it, because we'd just been living together for a year, just moved over to Sweden, then I started traveling again. So, and I think I actually got that job mainly because I'd been in the music industry and been used to traveling and stuff. So, but also I'm very into cars. It's one of my biggest interests in life too.
You're saying that's one of the things which a big tick on your CV was probably your enthusiasm for vehicles as well. Because I'm the opposite. I know a lot about cars, but I don't really like them too. Well, I like cars. I've got an appreciation for them, but I've got other things I spend my money on or I spend my weekend with. I still go to Cafe in the Machine and things like that, but I prefer things like talking to people in my spare time about living abroad.
Yeah,
it's more my bag, or sustainability.
A fun podcast for people to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. I could be, working on a project car, but no, I'm talking to you.
You mentioned project car. I know that I've been living in Sweden too long because I now have a Volvo PV 444 from 1956 that I found in Anna's sister's house when she bought that. It was in the barn. So, and I basically worked on that for a few years together with Anna's dad, and we, got it back in the road, got it road legal, cleaned it up, and now it's like an amazing weekend toy to go out and play in. It's a classic car from 1956. It doesn't have any seat belts actually, because fun fact, the seat belt was invented in 1959 and is printed on the belts and Volvo and Polestar cars. Yeah. That's a car before the seatbelt was in. But that's
a new podcast about car history now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm changing the topic. But and that was a thing that really, we're living in a new country, and obviously a car brand that's very loyal to Sweden, of course. Finding an old car like that, and that was something as well, which was very rewarding because I've made friends and have good colleagues and everything in Sweden, but it's still not the same as being home sometimes. So it's quite nice to have a project car to go and work on and take your mind off things as well. So I'm kind of that hands-on person. I either go and do music or go out on the bike or exercise and running and things. And I have the project car as well where I can go and get lost and take my time up as well. So I think everybody has their own types of hobbies, but it's important to keep them when you move to another country, because then it makes it easier to live there, I would say, when you're away from home. Fight the homesick a little bit.
Completely. And when you first moved, in terms of like making friends, you talked about friendships before, was it easier having Anna there and her circle of friends to kind of just be a tag along into? Was it hard because I guess they were probably speaking predominantly Swedish if they're all Swedes as well, and you were the Scotsman on the side?
Yeah, it definitely was easy in that sense that we could hang out with our friends and they all speak amazing English as well, to be honest. But then again, it's not your friends. So it's not like you feel like you're borrowing her friends, and there are as much my friends now as well, but it's you still feel like you need to go out and meet your own friends. And actually, I remember I met a friend from England who now lives in Stockholm, so I don't see him that much, but he was kind of similar, had moved over, was in Gothenburg with his partner and stuff, and I met up with him a few times, and we just met basically on Brits and Facebook group, which I think is now I've mentioned a music group and expat group and stuff. It sounds very cheesy because it's on Facebook and stuff, but it's actually very helpful. So I recommend them a lot actually, because I just reached out and then hung out with him for a little while, but now I've made been living in Sweden a bit longer. I've made my own friends now and stuff as well. So loads of good colleagues that I can hang out with after work as well. So that's great. It's really good too. I mean, to go back to your question, it doesn't happen right away. It takes some time. But luckily, I like my own company as much as other people.
I mean, that's one thing I was taught was, you have to be by yourself a bit more. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm by myself already, I lived alone at the time when I moved, and my girlfriend was still in the UK, so I kind of want to spend time away from myself.
Yeah.
Just so I'm not bored. Which is why I started this podcast, because I was bored.
Yeah, but then sometimes that's when the good things come up. You're doing so well with it now as well. So, but I think it also grew me as a person. Like, for example, I'm in Madrid right now for work, and the other day, when I had some time, I went on a bus tour on my own, and I don't think I'd ever done that before. So I like going. I can do loads of stuff on my own now and stuff as well. So it's
you're a seasoned solo traveler.
Exactly, and solo traveling is quite rewarding actually, because it's quite refreshing. You just go and do what you want to go and do. You don't have to ask anything. You just go and do it.
Is there a compromise? Yeah, it's I want to do this, I want to eat here. And touching on food then as a good segue into it, how have you found Swedish food? Have you found räksmörgås to be your favourite dish, or sill? Or...
Oh, definitely not sill. No, I actually think, I come from Scotland where we don't have the best food culture in the world, so everything is just deep fried. I really enjoy food in Sweden. I think the quality and level of food that they have is really high. Yeah, you could get a really reasonably priced meal or anything like that, and you can really have good food. But one thing that really is, and maybe you noticed this when you're in Sweden, James, is that people love to cook in Sweden, and everyone is pretty competent in the kitchen and can really make some good food. So I feel like a lot of dinner parties and people cooking at home, which actually is quite nice rather than going out all the time. Because then you would play like a board game after, or just hang out after. So that is a really nice thing about Swedish culture. And it happens everywhere in many countries, but I think that's something I noticed happens a bit more in Sweden than it did back home, at least. So yeah, and I think, of course, I love some Swedish meatballs and kanelbulle. Cinnamon buns are really good. My favourite Swedish cake is called a kärleksmums, which is basically like a chocolate cake with some chocolate icing and some coconut on top. That's the favourite one.
Yeah, not the one that what's the one that's from Skåne? Is it the semla cake or something?
Oh, the semla. Yeah, that's basically like Sweden's pancake day, or Shrove Tuesday or Fat Tuesday or whatever it's called. I must say, actually, I like semlas now, but when I first tried them, I didn't like them.
It's the marzipan one, right? The green thing.
You got the almond paste.
Not a fan.
The almond paste, and it's like a bun, and you got loads of cream, and I actually don't like too much cream, so it was, that's changed me now. I like that now. So
the only days, October 4th was Knabla Day. That's all I remember. It was quite an important day.
James, I don't know if you get sponsorship on this podcast or not, but you should, because it's so good. But if you were to get sponsorship for me, it would be for Tunnock's caramel wafers, because that's what I miss the most about being away from Scotland.
They are pretty good, and the tea cakes as well.
And I'm pretty sure you visited the UK once, and you brought me some back when you came back. Made it once for me, so
yeah, I had my own like jammy dodgers and things in my bag too.
And I think I still repay you to that day. I need to get you some Ribena and some dairy milk and chocolate for.
I'm in the UK now, so it's fine. You bring me back some Malibu or something.
Yeah, I'll bring you back something Swedish. But yeah, I think that obviously you miss your family, your friends, and home life, and that way of being homesick. But you do miss some of the food as well. So I do miss Tunnock caramel wafers and dairy milks and stuff, because Sweden has great alternatives as well, but it's just not the same. It's never the same.
For me, it was TV and things as well, and music. Like I used to watch a lot of BBC on a VPN, or I'd watch like How I Got News for You, or it's in Cats Cat. Just random silly things on YouTube and stuff, just so I felt like I was back at home as a way in. Probably why I didn't learn much Swedish, Tala Little Svenska. It was this all I could do, but or Min Svenska inte bra. Because I didn't really immerse myself too much, because living alone meant I basically lived a British life, but then,
like we said, Swedish people speak such good English, so you probably didn't struggle once the year you were here, I imagine.
No, only when I first went to the supermarket, because it took me 2 hours to do a shop, which would take me half an hour, because I was reading everything.
Translating everything.
Like, it's like, what's this? Is this the right kind of bread? No, I bought and like cheese. Cheese in Sweden is awful. Like, unless you know where to get it, because the standard cheese in the shop, it still wasn't good. It was really quite disappointing. And then all the the nachos and the Mexican food. There's a whole like aisle full of just tacos.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge thing in Sweden on a Friday, and
They love their tacos.
it's such a strange thing to be a part of. But I really like those kind of like, remember like Rivita, they have the like bread, but they have the ones with the filling.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, I like them. And that's actually when I first moved here, the just a simple thing like, would you have posse? Like, would you have a bag, or are you a member? And it's just like, obviously you could probably imagine or work it out what they're going to say when you're at the checkout, because it would be the same in the UK. Are you a member? Or do you have a... So those were like the things you learn first in Swedish, because I was like, okay, what are they saying? I mean, that was like the fear, the anxiety of like, okay, they're going to say something again. I need to learn what it is that they're saying. Well, you have a receipt.
I think the first thing I learned was Stanna a Nordstrand or something.
Because the bus stop, yeah.
Just constantly on that tram, like, or bus.
Yeah, I get told that I sound a little bit like the voice that speaks that on the tram and the bus when I speak Swedish.
I mean, it was probably when you learned it most, because it's like, exposed that more than most Swedish voices, maybe. I remember once going back to speaking Swedish, I went to, my girlfriend was visiting, and we went to a restaurant, and I was like, I've been practicing my Swedish, I can ask for and they were like, we responded, but not what I was expecting, so I was like, damn, I got that bit right there. And
then they pick up the thing.
Well, the menu food wasn't too bad, because you learn random words and things. Apart from, I didn't realise Vitlock wasn't white onion, it's garlic.
That is a good point, actually.
I don't even met Caesar, but there's the intern who was working with me before I left, and he made a mistake of, he didn't really eat much meat. So he was like, he knew the word shot was meat, K-O-T-T or U-T-T. So he thought, not shot was not meat, but it's beef. So he got home and was like, oh, yeah, sure. But his logic was there.
Yeah, that's actually a good tip that I learned when I was learning Swedish was stop thinking about the English translation in your head and think about think about what that is in your head, a picture of it instead of the English translation, because it always made you get confused with the actual word. Because that teacher I had, actually, she was really great. She made you think about the language like you probably would if you were learning it without knowing English, if you know what I mean. Like if you were learning it as a child growing up, and that's how I kind of sped up a little bit, was, okay, think about the image of what that is in my head, and don't think in last bill as a lorry or a truck. Just think a last bill, think of a truck in my head.
Yeah. It's like it's word associations, isn't it, I suppose? Because I learned German quite a lot before moving to Sweden, and I knew quite a lot of German. I could speak it quite well. Not anymore, because I've not really had to. But I noticed a lot of it was very similar, to the point where I'd mispronounce words because I'd be speaking it like a German would.
Yeah.
And it would help me if I didn't do that. It helped for sentence structure, it really helped, and a lot of words were quite similar. But I think it would help more with Danish, because Danish is like the German meets Swedish kind of language. But it's interesting how it all works.
And I think for me, it was a confidence thing as well, because you can get to a point where you can really understand and listen and read, but you're so anxious to speak it because it's quite nerve-wracking, because you know you're going to say something wrong and people are going to correct you or whatnot. Then Swedish people are so glad when you speak Swedish. And I had to get over that point as well with people. Sometimes they would giggle or they would laugh because you would say something in Swedish, but they weren't meaning it bad. They were meaning it because they were happy, like, oh, you can speak Swedish. So so it's just getting over that the fear, actually, of trying to do it. So, and I think once you can do it, it's really good. I mean, my nephew must know. I mean, he's only 3 years old, but he must know that I'm really crap at Swedish, because he always asks me to read the bedtime book, and I'm like, But to be fair, it helps me, because then I can learn the children's books along with him. So
I was taught a similar tip. So I bought a Swedish children's book, which has slut at the end, which is quite funny. They said, because my Swedish age is a toddler's, right? Because I'm learning Swedish like I'm a 2-year-old, because I'm doing word association and putting simple sentences together. And you have to go Actually, yeah, I'm in Sweden. I'm a toddler. So you have to kind of go through and maybe go to the library, get like children's books in Swedish and learn it that way. It's a potential way of learning a language, is to accept your reading age is much younger in your second or third or fourth language because you are not as proficient in it.
So, I mean, all these tips are for people listening is a great way to help to learn a new language. Swedish is quite a difficult language. I mean, technically there's only 10 million people in Sweden, roughly. So it's like, it's not the biggest language in the world either. So it's...
You throw in some Norwegians, perhaps.
Yeah. You can get by in but even the Swedes can't understand the Danish people, even though they say they can, but they can't. So
it's potato, isn't it? I suppose is the old saying. Is there anything more you wish to kind of discuss about life in Sweden? You obviously touched about quite a bit of it. You mentioned about already getting citizenship and that whole journey before, and now you're working there and that life. Is there anything else that stands out to you as something different?
I mean, of course, like the daylight hours and stuff is quite similar to Scotland, really, in terms of winter and summertime. I mean, you kind of, I guess this happens when you move to any country. I don't know, but I mean, you kind of start to change a little bit from what you were before to fit into society, or, you know, go with the trends. I'm not really the person that follows trends that much, but I didn't used to have long hair, and then I started growing long hair because loads of Swedes have longer hair, so things like that. And I just think the lifestyle that they lead is they're very hard workers in Sweden, but they and we mentioned it earlier, they look after themselves. They're very family orientated. They make the most of life, and I think that's something that some other countries could learn from Sweden, actually. And you should look at it as a sense that it's quite lucky to live here, because you do get a lot of different outlook on life. So I think the Swedes have a lot of good way of looking at living life.
Yeah, the holistic approach to how work and life actually is balance, and it's not one or the other. And that's why fika is so important, and you know, breakfast and second breakfast, and the Volvo routine of being regimented, having lunch at 11 a.m.
Yeah, I still can't get used to lunch at 11 a.m. I'll need to stop there with the culture thing. I mean, of course you get hungry in the morning before lunch, but I mean, lunch is 12 o'clock.
You got 11 to 11, right? Being Scottish. Well, great, and we can kind of cap off section 2, and we'll go into section 3. So, hello, and welcome back to the podcast, section 3, which is essentially a review of Andy's time living in Sweden. As you heard already, that, you know, it's been quite a roller coaster at times, and there's been quite a lot of things you've done in your time in Sweden. Let's kind of hark back to when you first moved. If you could kind of give yourself some advice before going, which might help you now or helped you kind of throughout the journey, would you have changed anything, or, you know, maybe tried learning Swedish earlier, or would there be something which would have really helped elevate your journey there, or your life so far?
Yeah, I think you answered two of the questions for me already. I think the first thing, and this is very much easier said than done, the first thing would have been to have a job lined up better, and to have like the paperwork and all the bureaucracy all sorted before moving over, basically. Because that was not the nicest couple of months. You tried to make a leap of faith and move to a new country and be with the one you love and do everything, but it was tough trying to get work and get but also, I mean, I came from a very different industry and background, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do in Sweden, so it was, my circumstances maybe didn't lead me to the way of being able to, you know, be with a bigger company and move there, because the places I'd worked didn't have places in Sweden. So that, I mean, if any advice there, I would say to try and at least have something lined up, so you're not going in totally blind. And I wasn't going in that blind. I did have contacts and the job that I started with and stuff, but that didn't come to fruition right away. You know, I came a few months. So, but it was that way. I did, and the second one, I did actually begin to learn Swedish, because of course Anna was Swedish, and she is Swedish, and I was trying to learn with her, and then I did start taking some lessons in Scotland before moving over. But it was like, I did quite a few lessons, but it was still like I was busy trying to finish up work with everything. I didn't have time to study much. So, and I think I could have been a lot better myself for the couple of months where I was in Sweden before I actually came back to Scotland for a month and moved back. I could have probably went to more courses or done stuff then, but I just finished a stressful job and stressful times, so it was more just kind of trying to find my feet again. So And that's, you look back in hindsight, but maybe it was for the best the way it was, how it turned out, and how it's progressed now as well.
I mean, I was doing Swedish on Duolingo for a year before I moved and thought I knew a few words, knew a few things, and I got there and they were like, yeah, what? Wrong, you're saying it completely wrong. And I was like, but, and helping it on a Jew, like, it's so useless, like saying a turtle is an animal.
I knew you were going to say wheelpad. I was like, when I was on Duolingo Swedish, I don't think I mean, you don't even, who talks about turtles in real life,
I know, Joining Dinga Whelpada. It's just, I could really use the word Whelpada. So somehow I know about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then I found out
random animal to...
So, not being too bad. Then looking back more of your time in Sweden in terms of your kind of life so far, and now you're settled there, and I think you're not planning on leaving anytime soon or exploring anywhere else. How have you kind of integrated it? Do you believe in the city or in the culture? Do you think it was easier than you thought, or it was harder, or it's just those things which maybe you thought, oh, that's gone really smoothly, but actually the things haven't worked so well? I think it stands out in that situation.
I think it's quite a difficult question, actually, because I feel like I'm part of Swedish culture and society now. I hope so, been there for 6 years. But it just kind of naturally happens. And I think everyone will have their own way of getting into society and culture, because we all have our own interests and hobbies and all different aspects of life. But I think I was lucky enough that I kind of learned a lot, and Anna's family is super great at taking me in as well to make me feel included, actually. I must say, like, kudos to like people like yourself who just kind of come over on their own and do it, because it's more difficult if you don't have support from a family or something as well, just to be there on your own. So I guess I was a bit lucky in that sense, that I had Anna's family and was included in culture and learned all the proper traditions and singing songs and all these things. So, yes, I guess I'm quite lucky in that sense, to be honest. Kind of, and that's what I think's maybe changed me as well, because when I go to new countries, I really want to see the culture, the real culture like that, and go and eat the food and do everything, because you appreciate it.
Go off the tourist traps.
Yeah, avoid the tourist traps and go to the real places that are...
I think that's one thing about having friends in like different cities and cultures, because you have the opportunity to go and do that. So one thing I've learned from just meeting random people on this podcast is I know lots of people now who live in different cities. So if I'm traveling, I'm going to be like, hey, can you just be my tour guide for a little bit I'm visiting? Or where should I go? Even people who just visit places, it's good to have that kind of prior knowledge.
There's all these great apps and places to tell you for places to go, but there's no better knowledge than a local person, because you get to these hidden gems that aren't listed everywhere, So it's maybe that could be a cool feature on your podcast, to get like hidden gems of the cities that people are from, or something.
Yeah, I might add that to the website at some point and try and make a blog from it. I suppose each city can have its own blog post or something. It's working for it. I think the other question I have is, like, how do you find like midsummer and things? Were you scared of being sacrificed, like Florence Pugh, or the traditions in Sweden, like the Julenlust, or anything like that stands out as it's been quite quirky, or have you enjoyed it, like going feet first into everything?
Julenlust is quite a funny one, because I used to love. I don't drink so much anymore, but I used to like Southern Comfort and cola. Don't judge me, but that's just what I like to drink. And I feel like you must actually taste like that. It's at first alcohol.
It's your mocktail.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite funny, because like the running joke of if it's different at Christmas to it is at Easter, because they have påskmust almost, and people say it is different, but it's exactly the same in my opinion. But I quite like Swedes have all these little fun running jokes throughout the year, and it's like similar things throughout the year, and I quite like that. They're very loyal to their traditions, which is, so is Scotland as well. We still wear the kilt and do things as well. Of course but I feel like Sweden's maybe a little bit more traditional in sense of like the midsummer celebrations, like you said, and the Varbari celebrations that's just been a couple of weeks ago. So it's like I quite like that people continue traditions, and that's quite nice and important in Sweden. I think is good.
I guess Sweden does it more locally. I think, with Scotland does it bigger. Like the tattoo in Edinburgh is incredible, and you've got like the Highland Games and things like that, which are a huge celebration of heritage in Scotland. But Sweden does maybe not as a grander scale as that, but they do it locally.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Maybe of course I'm sure they have bigger celebrations as well, but yeah, it's a good way to. And I think it's going to be quite funny because we'll be wearing our kilts for the wedding in a couple of weeks. And Swedish women have the traditional clothing as well. So actually been to a wedding where Anna's auntie and cousin were wearing the traditional Swedish dress, and I was wearing my kilt. But men in Sweden don't have really traditional; they just wear suits. So that was quite nice to see, like, the Swedish national outfit, which is different in all different regions and families. But it was really nice to see a Scottish kilt and the Swedish ladies in their nice national clothes as well. So it was that was quite cool, actually. I like that.
So everyone's in the same tartan, right?
Well, I have my Blair tartan, so my surname. So I got my family one, which is lucky. It's actually quite a nice one because you can be you can't choose your name. So sometimes you can have one that's your family name and it's not as nice.
It's interesting how tartan only stuck in Scotland, even though like Ireland has got a similar history in terms of being like Viking settlements and stuff like that. And obviously Sweden, Scandinavia, interesting where tartan came from and why it didn't spread across other parts of the British Isles and things.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. My dad actually used to work up in the Shetland Isles, which is quite funny because me and Anna went up to visit him once, and it's very Scandinavian in terms of namings of the towns, and because the Vikings used Shetland as a... So actually Anna understood a lot more of the naming of restaurants and town names than we did because it was more Scandinavian. So
I mean, where I grew up it's called Formby, which ends in BY, which is Form by, which is, village of Form or something, wherever Form is, but it's a similar thing.
Yeah, it's very similar to a Swedish word.
It's all over the UK, especially the north, I suppose, we're all on the coast. Thank you for giving your time, especially your busy week or 2 weeks, or and your kind of preparation for your wedding. It's quite a stressful time, I'm sure, for you. So I really appreciate the time to catch up and call and not just talk about cars or car companies.
We got some of it into the podcast at least. No, thanks for having me. It was good, and I didn't want to let you down. I wanted to join this one and make sure that we could have a good chat. So it's been really nice to be on. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. And as always, if you have enjoyed the podcast and if you have found a bit of information which has made you giggle or been really informative, please let us know in the comments. Please do, share around with your friends or people who maybe live in Sweden or are from Scotland or living anywhere or moving anywhere. It'd be really good to share Andy's tips of his life and living abroad. So it has been very Swedish centric because it's the one thing I know most about when it comes to living abroad. So I do, often give into my own urges of talking about what I know. But yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.